So, Sophie Milliken, MBE, welcome. I'd like to start off, though, on the title of MBE, right? I
Okay.
haven't really asked you much about this before, but can you tell us how you got it?
Well, I got it for services to business and to education, which sounds very formal and very serious, and that's the wording that they use. I found out that I got it when I was actually at my old school. So my old school, it's quite near where I live now. I can walk there, and I'm a careers and enterprise advisor for the school. So I help them with their employability strategy. And I'd gone there to do a talk for some sixth formers about why they should become entrepreneurs and to try and get them fired up about business stuff. And it was a cold, dark, wet, horrible November afternoon. And I'd come out, and you don't have any phone signal in the school. I don't know whether it's just my phone or whether it's something that they do to stop the kids from being on their phones, but I had no signal. And I came out and I was feeling a bit tired. I'd had a good session with the students, but I was feeling a bit like just ready to get home. And as I came out, my phone connects with everything and comes back to life. Ping, 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 ping. And I go into my phone and I'm looking in my emails, and I have this really strange email from I think it said something like NY or New Year's Cabinet Office list, something like that. And I thought, oh, that looks interesting. And I opened it, and it was this email apologising for how late the attached letter was. And I'm thinking, oh, what's this? Like, this is quite fun. And I'm literally walking down the bank, along Benton Park Road, down the bank to South Gosforth roundabouts, if anyone locals listening, walking down, doing my old route that I used to walk to the bus stop to get the bus home from school, reading this bizarre email with this apology that means nothing to me because I didn't really know what the thing was. And I opened the letter, and it basically was this very formal, it was about 15 pages long, this letter. And it was telling me that I'd been awarded an MBE for these services. And I was just like, is this real? Like, it's a very surreal moment. And I get to the end of it, and then it says in there that you can't tell anyone, and it's got to be top secret, and you have to. And this was why they were apologising. I only had about a day to reply to say that I wanted to accept it, because this letter was basically a letter from the Prime Minister's office saying, we've put you forward, you need to accept it within this time frame to be on this list. I'm like, oh my God, yes, I'll accept this. So it was really fun. But yes, it said that you can't tell anyone, and it was very specific. It was till 10 p.m. on the 30th of December, because I was in the New Year's honours list. It was the King's first honours list. So I decided that I was going to have a party on the 30th of December. I told all my friends and family, we're going to have this party. It's that bit of time between Christmas and New Year. Get everyone round, have a few drinks. And my friends are a bit like me, getting a bit boring in our old age, and we like going to bed early. And I had to keep them awake till 10 o'clock. So it gets to about 9:30, and they'd all come dead early, and they were kind of ready to slope off, making, I'm just probably going to head off now. No, you can't go. You've got to stay till 10 o'clock. So I made them all stay till 10, and then my daughter, who knew, she got up and stood on our table and told everyone that I'd got the MBE, and it was just really nice. It was really, really lovely. Yeah, it was fun.
So, do you tag it to Mum B as well? Is that how it works?
I tell you what, Jess got to come with me I got to go and pick it up from Windsor Castle last year, which was an amazing day. And she got to come with me, and she'd just started secondary school, and she didn't want to come because she wanted to miss school. And I'm like, Jess, do you realise how cool this is? This opportunity that you've got to come and meet royalty and see all these behind the scenes places back in this castle. She just doesn't quite realise how cool some of the stuff that she gets to do is, but hopefully she will when she's a bit older.
I'm sure she will when she looks back at what her mum's done in her career and that achievement. I mean, she will, but we both know like they're not impressed at this age, not about anything. In terms of so at the minute obviously you founded Moja, right? And we'll get onto the books and stuff in a minute that you've written, which I think are amazing. In terms of before Moja, was it SRS you were at? Is that where was it a lot of the work that you did within that?
Yes, that's why I got it. Yeah. So you don't really find out why you get your MBE. Well, maybe some people never, but what did happen quite quickly after I got it was I got a letter from the Department for Business and Trade, and that was quite a formal letter signed by some MP, and that referenced the fact that my business had helped, which was the first business, had helped over 30,000 students with getting graduate jobs, essentially, or preparing them for graduate jobs would be fairer. So then I was like, all right, now that makes sense, because it was for business and for education. And I was a bit like, education? So that made a bit more sense. And then when I went to collect it at Windsor Castle last year, Princess Anne gave me it, and she was having have a bit of crack with you when you go and collect it. And she was talking about that as well. And I was like, okay, that all makes sense. So, but they don't really tell you anything other than that. So it's quite strange.
Yeah, I had a similar experience at St James's Park actually when the Queen visited years ago, and I wasn't. And this is obviously about you, but this is quite a funny story. So
Yeah, tell me.
I was still playing football. I was 19 at the time, and I was still living at home in Walker with my mum. And anyway, I wasn't allowed to tell anybody that I was going to meet the Queen, right? So I went to St James's Park. There was me and Erin Hughes, and we were like the two young footballers in the club, and then you had like all the young athletes around the northeast. And I met the Queen, and it's quite a funny picture of me, like look like I'm staring out the Queen. That's funny. But anyway, I come home, and I'd obviously been, and I came home, and my mum said, "You all right?" I said, "I'm all right." I said, "What's for tea?" She went, "Come." She went, "What have you done today?" I was like, "All right, I've just been to training." And she obviously found out somewhere, and she went, "David, have you met the Queen today?" And I was like, "Oh, yeah. Yeah, like it was, speaking of your
It's like
daughter.
nothing,
Yeah,
nothing.
your daughter.
So did she actually come to the stadium?
No, we weren't allowed to tell anybody. So basically,
Uh-huh.
there was me, there was like the managers and stuff, and the coaches, and me and Aaron, and then loads of other young people from different various facets of sport, and then lots of security men that could look like they could just stare at you and you'd die. So you had all of that, but we weren't allowed to tell anybody. And then so I come home, like I say, she found out that way, but it was all like hush hush. You weren't allowed to say a thing about it. So much so I just kind of like forgot about it in the afternoon. It's just like young lad, do you know what I mean? But coming back to yourself, in terms of like, well, I'm interested as well, like that work that you did around getting the MBE into like the stuff you're doing now. Like what kind of like, it's obviously different types of
Very
businesses,
different.
very different. What have you found? Have you found that transition easy?
Yes and no. So I think when I had that first business, when that really started taking off and scaling up was when I became well known as the face of the business. So I was doing things like the first book. The book then led to being offered 2 TEDx talks. I didn't realize that was such a big deal because I'd never watched one before, which I'm embarrassed to admit now. So I just said yes to the first one. It was the most terrifying moment of my life actually doing that. But then that then created more opportunities. I got offered a column in a careers magazine. I got offered an ambassador role with a charity. So it was this snowball effect of doing things that focused on raising my profile, but without having a strategy or a plan around it. And then this snowball effect of I'd say yes to one thing, then this opportunity would come and so on. And what that meant was that when I was then going and doing sales meetings with people, they felt like they knew me, even if they didn't. So I'd go and meet them for a coffee and they would say, "Oh, I saw you won this award," or "You were at this thing," or whatever. And it just felt very relaxed from the off. And it was like they'd already decided they were buying what we were selling, but it just made it really, really easy. So that really skyrocketed the business. It really did. But like I say, it wasn't intentional. I then sold that business in 2019, stayed on for my earnout, then wasn't enjoying it. I didn't like the investors that we had. I didn't like one of the co-directors. It wasn't a nice environment for me to be in. So I decided to leave at the beginning of 2022. I then had a million restrictions as to what I couldn't do, because that's what happens when you sell a business, as you know. And I thought about, do I want to sit around doing nothing for 9 months? And that wasn't an option for me. I'd be very bored. And I was thinking about what I could do that wasn't operating in that industry. And I went and had a chat with, do you know Alice Hall? She owns Rowan Homes, and she has Pink Boutique as well. So I went to see her because she had not that long left Pink Boutique. She's since bought it back, which was quite interesting, but she'd left it. And I wanted to go and have a chat with her about how do I exit this business and keep my sanity, basically. And I went and had a chat with her and we were chatting about that. And then she said to me, "What are you going to do next? Have you, what's happening next? What's your plans?" And I said to her, "Well, I can't operate in the industry, but I've got this idea around what worked really well in the business of me raising my profile. And I feel like there's a process in there where we can create this and actually do it for other people. So people that get the value of it, who understand why they should be doing it, who probably don't have the time to do it because they're busy scaling their businesses, or they feel a bit uncomfortable. For some people, they don't want to put themselves out there. They feel a bit ick. They don't really, it doesn't feel natural to them." So I thought there's an opportunity there to create a service that does it for them, takes the heavy lifting away, but then they get the benefits that I had in that business. So I'm telling her this idea, and she's like, "Love it. Yep. you've got to go and do it. I'll be your first client. It was just really, really good. And I just thought, right, I'm onto something here. And then I created a deck, pitched to a couple of employees that I wanted to bring across with me, and got a new office, built a podcast studio, then on. And I think, I look back and it was a bit crazy because I didn't have any experience in this industry. I didn't even know what the industry was. I was like, is it marketing? Is it PR? And I think I've come to call it modern PR, which I think is quite a good fit, because it's essentially personal branding. But I think when people think of personal branding, they think of social media and doing a banging LinkedIn post or an Instagram post. And for me, that's just like, it's a bit of the fluff, if I'm honest. It's the last bit. So if you focus, there are personal branding agencies that will write your posts for you and things like that. But for me, that's too late. You've got to have the substance that you can then talk about, and the social media is the bit at the end when you've done all the substance. Because if someone's going to meet you for a meeting, they Google you, right? And a banging LinkedIn post you did 6 months ago probably won't come up, but some of the reasons why you've been doing lots of LinkedIn posts will come up. So it's the quality and the substance that comes up on Google, which we're helping to put there.
It's a great answer, because I was going to lead on to that in terms of the topic of personal branding, and in my experience in business as well, even just the word brand and branding is very subjective. I mean, the best I can think of in terms of the word brand is it's something you think of when you hear a name or a company name, a personal name. It's just thoughts that enter your head. But in terms of like the modern PR and what you're seeing there, what I've enjoyed by obviously following you in your content is, or I suppose I'm interested in digging in as well, is the process of writing a book as well that fits into this modern PR stroke personal branding. Ignore AI for a second, because I'll come on to that, right? But I'm sure it wasn't around when you were doing your initial books. But how would you advise somebody goes about writing a book in terms of leveraging your brand? Yeah.
I think everyone that is serious in business should write a book. In my world, I see lots of people that have written books, but that's not the normal world. Most people don't write books. So there's a stat I was just reading. I'm sure it's something like 80% of people think they've got a book idea in them, but most of those people never even put pen to paper and get started. So I think it's sort of 1% or less than 1% of people that actually get to the point of publishing a book. So, it's a very small number that get to that point, because you do have to have an idea. You do have to get it down. You have to go through all the various processes. But I think having a book, it just creates so many more opportunities, because it is essentially your business card that you can put out there to the world. You can leverage it in so many ways, with book launches, with parceling it up with products or services that you have, with just getting in front of people. I've got plans to post my latest one out to key people that I want to get in front of, or when I'm doing future speaking gigs. I've got one in a week's time, I think, and I've said to them, would you like to buy some books as well? And I'll parcel that into the fee. So there's just so many ways that you can leverage it. But I think, the point of actually getting to publish it, you do have to be disciplined. You have to have some sort of idea. The way that I like to do it is to come up with loads of other ideas within the big idea, and I actually write them down on cards. If you think about an average business book, it's between 30 and 40,000 words. I think the sweet spot is about 36,000, because I think if it's any less than that, your book looks a bit flimsy when it's in paperback version. If it's any more than that, the editing is bit of a ball ache, and also the printing costs are higher if you want to do bulk printing. So I think 36,000 is the sweet spot. Once you've planned your book out, you apparently, the feeling is you can write about 1,000 words in an hour. So when you think about it like that, actually it feels a bit more manageable. And if you've got these blog ideas or topics or whatever, and starting to put it into some kind of order, it doesn't take as long as you might think. The bit that takes more time is doing a proper copy edit, doing a proofread. If you do it yourself, it's learning how do you format it in all the different ways. And I think that is probably a lot harder than people might think. So, you think about your publishing options. You've got self-publishing at one end of the scale, through to traditional publishing at the other end. And then you've got working with a hybrid publisher, like with Moja, for example. We've got a publishing arm now where they can do all of that stuff for you. And I think it's important to think of your book as a bit of an investment, because if you do completely self-publish it yourself, then it's probably going to have mistakes in it. And will that represent you and your brand in the way that you want it to? Probably not. But I think having that book and getting it out there, you can do it quite low cost, and having someone that can support you, whether it's an agency like mine or you get a book coach or something, is going to make sure that that content is really high quality. And you know, you can be holding a book that you're proud of, but it's not as hard as you think. I think the first stage is just committing to doing it and getting the time in the diary.
Yeah, in terms of like the opposite ends of the scale of self-publishing and doing the traditional route, the output of that process, obviously you can have a published book like hardback, paperback, but then you can also have a digital version, I guess. If you had to pick one or the other, which one would you pick or advocate?
That is such an interesting conversation. And if I had to pick one format right now, it wouldn't be either of those. It would be audiobook. And I'll tell you why, right? Because I've never got into audiobooks. I still can't get into audiobooks, which is weird because I love podcasts. So really, I should like audiobooks. I'd never done an audiobook with my first two books because I'm not an audiobook consumer. So it didn't even really occur to me to do it. With this one, because I've been interviewing lots of people for my own podcast, which is Beyond the Bio, which is all about raising your profile, I've interviewed probably 5 or 6 authors over the last year. And one of the questions I've been asking them is about their book sales and how much they're making from their books and which formats performing best for them. All of them have told me that audiobook has outperformed the other two. So this has changed my mind. So they've all consistently said that with the 3 formats, so audiobook, Kindle, ebook, and paperback, the split for all of them has been 50% audiobook and then the other 50% between Kindle and paperback. So that is significant. So that made me, I mean, I've got a podcast studio, and we do record audiobooks for our clients. So it was a no-brainer for me to do an audiobook this time. But I hadn't realised quite what the impact was. And obviously now that this third book's on sale in all 3 formats, I can see it in the sales myself. So interesting that that's the way to go. That said, I think it's important to have all 3. It shows that you're credible.
Yeah.
It gives you different options. If you've got a paperback, you can do what I said about parceling it up with speaker fees for conferences and events, which I think is brilliant. And then with an ebook, you can do some creative stuff with that. So at the moment, we've got a Kindle promotion on for my book because it's launch week. So we've been able to discount the book for what that does is it inflates it in the chart essentially. So it's a bit of a gimmick, but it's good fun and it generates lots of publicity. So they've all got their place, I think, but it's remembering that if you do it yourself as a self-published author, you have to format it differently for each of those. And it's a lot hard. It's a lot more to it than you think. And you need different covers and different sizes. And yeah, there's quite a bit to it. But I think all 3 are valid.
I like as well, like you said there, you can, I mean, when you've got that, I suppose that macro pillar content of a fully, written book, whichever format, then you segue into, say, the speaking opportunities. It just gives you that chunk of content to go in with, doesn't it? And because you've wrote it yourself, you've got it's kind of inherent, isn't it, that you can quite easily talk about it because you've spent so much, as you said, you spent so much time writing it and so much.
You're the expert. You know it all. And an interesting conversation I had. Do you know Daniel Priestley?
Yes, I do.
So Dan was on my show a couple of months ago now, and we recorded an episode. He'd just been on Diary of a CEO, and we recorded this episode talking about what he calls the podcast pyramid. So if you think about podcasting as a strategy, it's a really powerful strategy. So he's never had his own show. His strategy is to guest on other people's shows, and he talks about this concept of a podcast pyramid where tier 5 at the bottom is people that are maybe just starting out in a podcast and it gets sort of tens of listens each week. Then tier 4, hundreds of listens, tier 3, thousands, tier 2, tens of thousands, and then your top tier, which is the likes of Diary of a CEO and those mega podcasts that are top of the charts in all the countries. And he said, if you look at Diary of a CEO as a great example, that top tier level podcast, everyone that goes on Stephen Bartlett's show's got a book. All of them. You might get the odd celebrity that doesn't, but even the celebrities have books now. So you can use the book to leverage podcast appearances as well as speaking appearances. And I thought that was really good, to be fair. I think there's something in it.
I mean, I'm a massive fan of Daniel Priestley. Have been for, I'm going to show my age, but I'm at least 10 years.
He's cool, he's good.
He's really good. I've seen him speak a few times. In terms of influence on, say, Mojo in particular, did he have a bit of influence on how you shaped your services and what you were doing to promote yourself?
Yeah, probably a bit, because I do some work for Dan. So I'm a coach on his Key Person of Influence program. So I'm quite heavily involved with his business. Well, I'll say heavily involved. It's a side hustle, but I really enjoy it. It's a fantastic community and I really enjoy it. I think a lot of what I learned on that around, if you look at his Key Person of Influence methodology, it's got the 5 Ps and there's a P on profile. So whereas his program teaches people what they should be doing and how they do it, we do it for them. So at some point, I'd probably quite like to sell Mojo to his group of businesses. I think that would be a really good fit for us and for him.
Yeah.
So he definitely had an influence on me. I'm lucky that I've worked with him for a long time and some other really inspirational people as well. And I think you learn from these people, don't you, and sort of take something from every interaction.
Absolutely, and I think obviously yourself as well, especially in the Northeast and women in business. I mean, it's the opposite is true. People are looking up to you now as well. And can you tell me a bit more about that community in terms of women in business and particularly the Northeast and what you're doing around that?
Yeah, sure. So before I had that first business, I actually worked for John Lewis for about 12 or 13 years. And I started at John Lewis Newcastle, Bainbridge as it was back then, a million years ago. And the reason why I applied there was I was on the grad scheme, the local graduate scheme, and I applied there because I didn't want to live in London. And I felt like if I applied for the central scheme, I'd have to move to London. And I laugh a little bit about that now because I did end up in London with John Lewis for like 7 or 8 years. And I kind of wish I'd gone earlier because it did create all of these opportunities for me once I was there. But anyway, I've spent a lot of time in London even now. But when I left John Lewis, at that point, I'd done my 12, 13 years. And I was moving back to the Northeast and I was setting up that first business. And I didn't know anybody really outside of John Lewis because it was quite sort of insular in how it was set up. Actually, I did know people in London because the last job I had there was a bit more sort of outwardly facing. But I didn't know anyone in business in Newcastle apart from people that worked at John Lewis. So I thought, I need to get out and meet people. And I started going to these events. And bearing in mind, this was like 2013.
Yeah.
They were awful. They were full of old blokes that played golf, if I'm being honest. It was very, very much like that. And having come up from London, it just felt really old-fashioned and really dated. And if you got sort of stuck talking to someone at a coffee table at an event, you were just stuck with them for the whole event and just felt a bit soul-destroying, if I'm honest. And then I went to an event that was run by something that doesn't exist anymore, but it was called Forward Ladies. And it was like a women in business breakfast event. And they were doing a launch in Newcastle and they had them in different cities around the country. And I went to this big launch and I was like, oh, this is quite good. And then they started running monthly breakfasts and I started going along and I made a group of friends and there were 7 of us in this group that met quite often outside of the main group. And we're all very, very different. And most of us are still friends now. And we used to just sort of talk about business challenges and business ideas. And it was very business focused. And then it became everything else as well. And we would go out for drinks and dinner and whatnot. And like I say, most of us are still in touch now. And what I found was like having that network was kind of a light bulb moment around the support that was available and who I could go to when I was having business challenges, etc. So when that group then disbanded, they decided that the breakfast events weren't commercial, and a few of us were like, well, we loved it. It was the best bit of Forward Ladies. So we took on the breakfast events and we took on Newcastle, Middlesbrough at the time. We don't do Middlesbrough anymore, but we had Newcastle, Middlesbrough and London, and we took it on and we took on the breakfast events. So this is a bit of a side hustle for me because we still do it now, but we've got Newcastle, London and Paris, and we have monthly breakfast events where women can come. It's so cool. And it's a really lovely environment because it's very informal networking. Then we always have a speaker each month who will either share their story or they'll give us a practical workshop on something and then a bit more networking. And, it's not hugely commercial. It's not why we've set it up. It covers its costs really, but it's just creating a nice environment where women can support each other. And I think, we're always going to need that. I was talking to someone recently about whether you need women events still. And I think you do. Even now, I just hosted the Newcastle event a couple of weeks ago and someone came to it. There was a couple that came to it actually that that session where they were dead nervous and they were like, this is the first networking thing I've ever been to and I just feel really nervous, but I felt like it's a women in business event, so I knew I would feel a bit more comfortable here than if I just launched into something else. And I just think, we're all in different stages with our journeys, but you do need that support, and I think there is a place for it. So I'm really pleased to be involved in running City Ladies, but as well it links into loads of other things that I do with women, because I'm doing a PhD part-time at Durham Uni, which is all about female entrepreneurship. So there's a link there. And obviously I chair Smart Wakes Newcastle, which is supporting women in the region. So yeah, it's just something that I've kind of fallen into. And I think there's something around paying it forward, because, when I started out, people would give me their time. I would get in touch with quite prominent businesswomen that I looked up to at that point, that I saw as like the local business celebrities in the Northeast. And I would be dead bold and I would ask them if I could go and see them. I would, make it really easy for them to, or make it really hard for them to say no, rather, where I would, be asking for their time. And, I learned a lot from a lot of women that gave me their time and their support. And I've got some women, that I could reel off now that you'd probably know, that have really helped me. And I think it gets to a point where you then become the one that's a bit more experienced and a bit older and wiser, and you want to pass that on and you want to help lift other people up too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think in terms of, I like the topic of leadership, and that can mean lots of different things. But I do believe in the same thing, giving back, and it's whichever segment or demographic or group of people you want to focus on. But I had a chat, funny enough. I think I've introduced you to a while back, with Tabitha Kofi, who's in America, in Australia, and she did the TED Talk and all this kind of stuff. And she's very much the same as you. She's very much into giving back to the community. And also there's a guy, Anthony Hutton, that was on Big Brother. He does a lot around men's mental health, and it's a kind of a similar kind of situation where men in certain situations won't talk because unless they're with other men. And it's an interesting that also people can get mixed up on the gender thing, when actually it's just a group of people that have a certain need, and that's the reality of it. People can sometimes over talk it, but actually it's just, that's all it is. In terms of the just wanted to circle back before I forget, though, on the book thing, because obviously AI's ramped up loads, I'd say, in the last 18 months, like hugely. I use it off and on for various different things, but in terms of like your business, book writing, things like that, do you see it as useful?
Yes and no. I actually interviewed an AI expert for my podcast recently, and I was talking to her about it, because what I see in social media is a lot of AI being used on people's LinkedIn posts or in the comments. And I think that I've got quite a good radar for spotting it. I spot certain emojis that always appear, or certain phrases, unlocking, fostering, and all these words that you think, oh yes, I know what you've been up to. And I was quite skeptical about it when I spoke to this lady, and actually she changed my thinking on it a bit, because I would never use it for a book or for social media, because that feels to me inauthentic. However, the way she described it to me was that you don't get ChatGPT or whatever to write it for you. You get them to tidy it up. So you write it yourself. So if you were looking at LinkedIn as an example, you would write a LinkedIn post and then you chuck it through ChatGPT and you say, make this sharper or punchier, or come up with a great hook, or make it funny. I mean, ChatGPT's humour is dreadful, so it probably wouldn't make it any funnier. And I did try that actually at the time and thought, oh, this is quite good. And then I've forgotten about it, and I've not tried it again since. But I do think there's a place for it. But I think, my writing style is very me. So a few people that have been reading the book have reached out to me and said, I feel like I can hear you speaking it, even though, I mean, they could have just bought the Audible version and they would have heard me speaking it, but they're saying, oh, it sounds like you, it sounds like we're having a chat. And I think the language that I use is the language that I use when we're having a chat now. And it does feel like me, and I want it to, because, my brand, I hope, is that I am quite warm, and I think I'm funny, but not everyone will. But, I like to have that banter and that humour in it, and ChatGPT wouldn't have that for me. So I wouldn't use it to write a book. I think it'll be quite obvious. I've got a feeling as well, I might be wrong, but I feel like Amazon's got some sort of software that checks for stuff like that. I might be wrong. If it hasn't, it should have, because what's the point in buying a book that some computer's written?
Yeah, I think the reason I bring it up with yourself is because it segues well into the book, obviously, but with somebody that's got a rich experience in the highs and the lows, as you mentioned, you had a difficult time at spots of SRS. You've got all, you've been in different careers. You've got a lot to give, you've got a lot to offer. And I've spoke to people that tend to use it, like you said, not to tidy things up, but also to just get things out of their own head without needing to speak to another person, and kind of just almost like get some ideation, get some brainstorming going with it. And the way I kind of look at it, I use it myself sometimes, and it's like if I have my thoughts in my head and I just want to put them across, it's much lower cognitive to use AI than to have a conversation with somebody else. Or if I try to write it fresh, it's actually high cognitive for me because my writing skills aren't great, right? But then you're absolutely right. I can spot, I think our gut instinct is you can spot written AI, and not typos, but the Americanized language and, like you say, the emojis. I do see a place for it, but I also kind of sit in the middle and towards where you are as well. That especially when we're talking about modern PR, personal branding, if somebody starts to see that of you and they just know you're using AI and it's heavy AI and you're not even checking it, it's quite detrimental to your brand. I would say. What do you think?
Yeah, I totally agree. There seems to be a bit of a push on LinkedIn in particular at the moment to be pushing out more content. So there's some people that I'm seeing in my feed a lot who are literally posting multiple times a day. There's a few I need to mute actually. I'm just so over it. And you can tell that they're using it, and they have to use it because they're just posting so much content. And I don't know why people are feeling the need to post that often, because for me, LinkedIn is actually the best platform for not having to post very often. A friend of mine who's got about 70 or 80,000 followers, he'll post, he's posting a little bit more at the moment because he's just set up a new business, but some months he'd post twice in a month, but he'd get, it would go off when he did it. It was just massive for every single one. He gets thousands of engagements on it. But I'm in the camp of you post less frequently, but you post better. So this week, because I'm in book launch mode, I am probably going to post every single day this week on LinkedIn. But that is very unusual for me. I can't remember the last time I've posted that often, because when I try and post too much, it dilutes the quality of what I've got to say, and it dilutes the level of engagement that I get. So for me, the sweet spot for a platform like LinkedIn is probably to post twice a week. And sometimes I don't even hit that. Sometimes it's once, but I try not to let it go any less frequent than that. But once or twice a week, but a good quality post that I have thought about and I've spent a bit of time putting together. Because as well, it's not just about getting the post out and hitting, post. It's being around to be able to engage with that post afterwards, because you'll know this, LinkedIn likes you to be active. So you put a post out and then just bugger off for the rest of the day and don't engage with any of those comments, it's not going to do as well. So you've got to be around, especially if that first hour after you do the post is when people are starting to comment. You need to reply and comment to their stuff to kind of keep things moving and keep it going off, really. So yeah, there's a bit more to it, I think, than just kind of, what's that phrase, spray and pray or whatever. It's a bit like that, isn't it?
It is, and I think I'm in the same kind of school of thought as you. With I'll aim for like 3 in a week, and going back to what you were saying about looking at the data in terms of audiobooks and stuff. It's free information. You can Google it. You can use AI and ask it as well, but you can find out the best days depending on the sector you're in, your position you're in. But also, me personally, I think I like to spend time. I spend more like 80% of my time on there isn't posting. It's actually learning from people that I respect and look up to, and having something to say on somebody else's post and engaging that way. And I think that I'm guessing. I think LinkedIn also knows when you're in DM, so also it knows what you're seeing and doing in your DMs. It knows what you're seeing and doing on other posts, and therefore I think it leverages that and gives you more of a reach.
I agree.
If you do that consistently, and funny enough, my first podcast was with Chris Morrow, who's a LinkedIn top voice, and so there's 1 billion people as of today on LinkedIn, and only 300 people a year get selected for that. And he thought it was a joke. A bit like when you received your letter for the MBE, he was like, "No, this can't be right." But it turns out, and it wasn't AI that selected him. It was a team of people, and they interviewed him, and they did all of that, checked all his other social profiles, and they gave him it. So at first he thought he screenshotted everything thinking this is a joke, but then it turns out the reason they did was because even if he got 14 likes on a post, he would post. He posted 80 videos this year so far, but it wasn't the fact that he posted 80 in the quantity; it was the fact it was consistent, and he
And
didn't.
LinkedIn are loving video content at the moment.
Yeah,
So a friend of mine, Leah Turner, she's huge on LinkedIn and she's a proper guru of everything. She knows all the stuff about LinkedIn. And she was telling me that the reach on video content is really, really high. So I've tried, well, I was going to do 2 videos this week for my launch week. I did one on Monday that did quite well. And then I tried to upload one this morning. I was on the radio station this morning and I did this video outside it, but it wouldn't bloody upload. I think it was too big a file. Wouldn't upload on LinkedIn, and then I had to go in and record the segment, so it meant I'd missed it, and then it didn't make sense to post it afterwards. So I was a bit annoyed, but I am trying to dabble a bit with video and see how it goes. But yeah, I'm hearing a lot about how LinkedIn is sort of prioritizing people that are using video.
Yeah, it is. I mean, we've had a bit of success with just like 30 seconds to 1 minute clips, and you'll be on a few in the next week.
Can't wait.
In terms of like this modern PR again, just going back to that and what you do. Let's say somebody's, let's go grassroots. Let's say somebody's new in business and they've got some kind of startup, and they want to start early and really focus on their kind of personal brand, that and your modern PR approach, if you like. What would be the starting point for you? What would you do with them first?
So I think that's the kind of person that needs to spend the most time on it, because
Right.
if they're not known at all, or they're trying to scale a business, they have to become known. It's a bit easier when you've been around for a while and you've built up a certain level of profile, because what happens is when you hit a certain point, all the opportunities come to you, and you're then, having gone from being a startup and saying yes to everything and seeing this snowball effect of everything, you're at the opposite end where you have to say no to things, which is actually quite hard, but it has a lot of benefits in that you don't have to do a lot of the stuff yourself. You can just say yes to all these things. But if I was starting out from the beginning again, what would I do? I think I would say, well, first of all, you've got to work out where you're at with your profile. So if anyone wants to connect with me, I've got a great quiz on my LinkedIn bio that will give you a score for each element of your profile right now. So it breaks it down to different areas. So we've got things like networking, what's your networking strategy? What's your game with networking? We've got stuff around content creation. So that might be books, but it might be blogs, it might be news posts or social media, etc. We've got awards. So awards is really important. Some people are quite skeptical, quite rightly, of awards, because some of them are very scammy and very dodgy. But actually, if you get into the right awards, then the networking opportunities that creates are just epic. So for me, when I got involved with the Great British Entrepreneur Awards 5-6 years ago now, that has created amazing opportunities for me, because they've got this brilliant community that sits alongside it. So the amount of amazing business people that I've met through that community, again, has had sort of life-changing results on some of the stuff that I've done. So I'd be looking at awards, speaking. Everyone wants to be a speaker, but how do you position yourself as a professional speaker? Because, I get people coming to us all the time saying, I want to be a speaker and I want to charge $5,000 or $10,000 to do this. And I'm like, okay, so what have you spoken at? What are you charging at the moment? What are your assets? And often they'll have no assets. So as a minimum, you want a speaker pack that you can be sending out to event organisers, because that's going to make yourself look professional. You need professional headshots. You need an outline of your talks. You would want ideally a speaker reel as well. Ideally, gold star would be that you have a website in your own name that is just about you for speaking. So there's all these different things that you can do. It all takes time. So you've either got to put the time in and carve out that time to do these things, or you pay someone like us to do it for you. But this is why I wanted to bring the book out, because the book is a practical how-to guide with all of those elements, and there's action points and plans that you can put together, and there's some resources that come with it to help you do those things. But you've got to do it. I can't think, there will be some businesses out there where the founder isn't the face of the business and it's successful, but when you're starting out, it really, really helps. It really helps.
I think in terms of everything you've said there, in terms of the book, you've got a book launch, right? You say you've been on a radio, you're doing podcasts, you're on this podcast, right? I just want this final pod also be about, you've got this busy lifestyle, okay? You work incredibly hard. What do you do? If you imagine you're speaking a lot, it takes a lot of energy, right? What do you do to kind of switch off, unwind, Did you find that easy? Did you find that hard?
I find it really, really hard, really
Right.
hard. Yeah, I think I'm the kind of person that probably never really switches off, which isn't great. It's something that I'm working on. I felt really, really close to burnout last year, about October, November time. I'd said yes to too many things. I was up and down to London literally all the time, and I felt done in. I felt absolutely exhausted, and I thought I'm just going to have a breakdown if I carry on at this pace. And I decided that I was going to have a year of no. This is meant to be my year of no, and I'm laughing because this month is insanely busy. And just this morning, I've been invited to 3 separate events, all in London, all early evening, all in the same week in a few weeks' time. And I'm just like, oh, and they look really great as well. I think I'm going to say yes to one of them that I just couldn't say no to. I haven't yet, and I'll think about it. But I do struggle with it because I have got all the different responsibilities. You know, I've got this business, I've got the charity, I've got the PhD, I've got things that I say yes to that kind of don't necessarily fit neatly in any of those. And I'm also a single parent, which is hard. You know, it's hard bringing up kids. And I think there are some practical things that I do. So I try where I can to go to bed early. Like, I love going to bed early, and I'm so excited at the thought of going to bed early tonight because I had a heavy Monday night for my book launch in London, and I was paying for it yesterday, and I'm ready for an early night tonight. But yeah, sleep, good quality sleep makes a really big impact for me. Not drinking alcohol, you know, I'm paying for that from Monday, but you know, I don't drink that often anymore because it wipes me out so much, and it means that I'm not very productive. So there's certain things I know I can do that will help me operate better. But in terms of that switching off, you know, I don't watch much TV. Every now and again I'll binge watch something, but I can go weeks and think, oh, I've not watched anything, not even turned the TV on. But what I do like doing instead is, for my early night, I love going to bed with, I read Kindle, I read on Kindle. So if it's a business book, I like a paper copy that I can maybe write on. But for fun reading, which is usually some like fast-paced thriller that you can get totally lost in, it's a Kindle for me. So it's the only thing you can do where you're not then multitasking. You can't hold a book and get absorbed and into it and be watching the telly or be cooking something or whatever, which I think is why I don't like audiobooks, because for me, I would totally feel like I had to do something else at the same time, and I wouldn't absorb it and I wouldn't relax. So yeah, I think reading's a big one. I love going on holidays. I've had a couple of really nice holidays this year. I really want to book something else, but there's just too much going on. I struggle to then find the time in the diary to take a full week off. But yeah, I love a holiday. I love exploring and getting out and about and stuff, but it is hard. I've totally not nailed this whatsoever. I really haven't. So it's looking for little opportunities. And you know, a client of mine I was talking to last week, she was challenging me on this, and she said, why don't you just take a day off every week? And I was like, I just can't do that at the moment. But actually what I could do at the moment is maybe take one Friday off a month and go and do something. And I was at a spa this weekend with a friend of mine, and it was amazing. It was one of the nicest spas I've ever been to, and I felt really relaxed, even though I'd been feeling quite stressed about going into this week and how busy it was, and you know, how much pressure was on really to sort of get the book off in style. And I just felt so chilled and so relaxed, and it was just the perfect timing. And I thought back to when I was probably at the point of coasting with the last business, where it was just smashing sales targets and it was quite easy. And I did used to take regular Fridays off, and I used to go to spas, and that was my thing. I'd have a spa day every month, and it was lush. And I need to get that back because I know that that's something that has a positive impact on my well-being. So I need to do it.
It's valuable because what you're saying there is, you know, there's loads of advice you can give people, right? But you're also showing people that, you know, through success you still have challenges, right? And I think sometimes people think, you know, when you at a certain level, all right, everything's easy for you, and it's not, is it? It's like you still have challenges, and it's probably the most common challenge is that, you know, it is switching off in a modern world with apps, with phones, with technology, literally everywhere. But people hearing that, even you struggle sometimes to switch off, it's quite normal, to be honest.
Yeah,
Like,
it is.
most people say it's hard than say it's easy, really. Listen, I wanted to keep this on point because I know you're busy. I want to thank you for coming on. Well, it's our 3rd episode. We're very, very early in this stage, but to have someone like yourself on has been absolutely fantastic. And I hope it all goes well for the book launch. I know we're sending a couple of, I think Steve and Phil are coming up.
Awesome.
And I'll be sure to buy a copy and actually read it.
Yes, that's what you've got to do. You've got to do all the stuff. I've got a copy here, but all
Brilliant.
the stuff, you know, there's action points all the way through it, and you'll learn loads.
I'll put a link to it as well when we post this out, actually. But yeah, I look forward to reading it. But thank you very much for your time, and I'll meet up with you soon in the Toon.
In the Toon.
All
Thanks,
right,
David. Thank you.